In terms of writing
Yeah.
a script, let's say it's like for a 90-minute feature film, what do you think is more detrimental to a film story? Conflict that takes too long to present itself, or conflict that starts off too soon?
Oh, interesting. Well, I think, what they teach you in film school or any writing book is, conflict is the source of all drama. That if everybody, if all your characters are just getting along, then
it's boring.
Nothing. How long are you going to? So, I think there's a tendency, there's a reason why most movies over the last 20 years have adopted the James Bond opening, which is just start with conflict from frame one, so that you can hold everybody's attention. That's a good question. I would probably say that, delaying conflict too long, or not introducing what the central conflict is going to be, can be a problem. Like, for example, I did a short recently. It was like a 40-minute short. And shorts are harder because I think, because you have less time to establish character. And the movie that I was making is this thriller called Where's Roman, which I'm actually very, very happy with. It's kind of a surrealistic thriller. And the 3/4 of the movie is really this one character venturing into this very disturbingly weird hotel and meeting all these characters and all these terrible things happening to him. But I wanted you to care about this character before all this crazy shit happened. So I deliberately wrote like almost a 5 or 6 minute scene in a bar where you meet this main character through another character. And it virtually is no conflict. It's really just two guys who, like a strangers meeting, just having a conversation about stuff. And it was a way of getting you to know who this guy was and what his situation was and who he was before all this stuff happened. And I think half the audience, or the people that watched it, half or a little more than half, really appreciated that. And then I met another filmmaker, who's been around for years and years and years, and said, I really loved the movie. I would have cut down that conversation at the beginning, meaning that he was saying, get to the thing, get to the conflict soon. I think that's the hardest thing for writers to do, is to try to establish a character, even through action, and at the same time getting the plot going, which tends to be when the conflict is established. So the only danger of starting with conflict too soon is that you've got to somehow maintain this level of drama, and that if you stop, that people are going to be accustomed to a certain tension or a certain thing, and when you stop to smell the roses, you may lose everybody. But I don't know. That's what I was thinking.
Or like with Dinner with Andre, where
right. Well, that's what it is. But then you say, look, that's what it's going to be. And then conflict takes different, it doesn't have to be they're holding your daughter hostage. It can be this guy is being, passive aggressive, and that can be enough,
That's true.
In that context, that can be the Death Star battle, depending on, what you've told the viewer the movie is supposed to be.
Right. So Born Identity versus Dinner with Andre.
Right, exactly. Born Identity has you have different expectations of conflict, I think.
Right. So when you were writing, how are you weaving in conflict? Like, what are you already thinking of what those beats, what those points are going to be when you start it, or do you come along in your rewrites?
Yeah, I think, I've never been really good at the whole outlining process, although I've had to do that when I've written for money, because the studio demands a very specific, detailed outline before they move you on to the writing stage. But personally, I like to try to get to know the character in my own mind, know the characters enough in my own mind, so that I know how they're going to behave or react to whatever I throw at them. To me, it's like if you can understand the characters, and sometimes that's why it's so easy, sometimes that's why it's better to base a character on somebody you know or yourself, because, whether you base it on your brother or your mother or your best friend or yourself, because then you know how that person talks, how that person's going to react to something, and then you don't have to make everything up. Otherwise, the burden of you as a writer to make up everything that happens is a lot. Whereas if you know who the character is, and the example I always use is if somebody's walking down the street and a guy jumps out with a knife and says, "Give me your wallet," If it's me as a character, I probably get on my hands and knees and start crying and, you know, whatever. If it's Jason Bourne, you know, a chase ensues. You know what I mean? So knowing the character first, I think, is helpful. And then, yeah, I think all writers probably have in their mind a handful of, if not everything, a handful of things that are supposed to happen that are going to drive the story. But I prefer, probably to my detriment, to only think out the whole thing to a certain degree. I try not to have everything set, and I try to, maybe I have certainly maybe the first act. I know what the inciting things are going to be, but then I like to sort of let the characters in some way tell me what the next scene is, as opposed to making them do something that I've already. I think more interesting things have come out of that. And in the times where I've had, like a lot of us have an ending in our mind, the times where I've had a definite ending, like the whole reason for writing the script was because I got the last scene in my head. Mm. By the time I get there, inevitably it's not that, because the characters have grown and the situation has taken on some sort of life of its own. So by the time it gets to that thing, it doesn't make sense anymore. That would have been an imposed ending or an artificial ending. And so I think the writing can be a lot easier the more real those characters become for you.